Apple released its new product line for the new year. They put a action button on the side of the camera instead of a switch. They might have added a few megapixels to the camera. Who the heck cares? Nobody cares. I mean, maybe if you're an Apple groupie and you get really excited by these product events, but you get these big events, they hype them up big time. They make you think there's going to be all these new product launches and everything. And then all of a sudden they don't do nothing. They do an action switch. Like last year was the dynamic island. Like everybody is really still reeling from that big announcement. No, nobody cares. They don't really come out with new technology. They're just keeping the status quo going. So like what we see on most of these product launches, Apple tanks and it takes down the whole market. It gets really frustrating too, just from a swing trader, because, hey, you know, I have some good swing trades going on, but because Apple hypes up these events beyond absurdity, and then the market's disappointed when they're not curing cancer from the event, yeah, then all of a sudden the stock plummets. Also hit that like, subscribe button watching it on YouTube, because that also helps me quite a bit to grow the community. Let's go ahead and look at the Apple chart here. When we're taking a look at this Apple chart, what do we got? Well, you may have a new trend line that's starting to develop here, and it's kind of a funky trend line. This goes back to the beginning of March, before the whole regional banking crisis started. And you've got a little bit of a support here that's happening here off of the August lows, and then again here off the September lows. We've tested it twice in the last 4 days. It's held up each time. It held today. So there's a potential for a bounce opportunity. Obviously, you had this big gap here, and if you tried to play it immediately, you're probably losing money right now because of the today's sell-off. So the gap is definitely not something you wanted to play. What we want to look at right now is whether or not it can bounce off of this blue rising trend line. If it can't hold that, where I think Apple is going is to a retest of this huge level of support. Now, this level of support was once resistance, and it was some nasty resistance. Every time it got up there, it saw massive tops in the stock. I mean, the time that we tested it back in March, it goes from 179 all the way down to the 120s. That's pretty significant. That's like a 30% sell-off. Then again, we tested it back in August of last year, and at 177, we saw it decline all the way down to October of 123, another 30% decline. But back in January, it finally bottoms, and it just goes on an epic tear. It breaks through resistance and keeps on climbing. One of the most impressive trend lines of the year. So the potential is there for a retest if it can't hold this blue trend line. And I think that could be a good support level for Apple going forward. It's definitely one that I would be looking at from a bounce opportunity in this market. So if it does do that, it's going to take a lot of the NASDAQ down with it, because Apple's a $3 trillion stock almost, and it has a lot of influence on the broader market. So keep that in mind. Now, you had this breakout pattern here, and this is a little bit of a concern because you had this nice basing pattern following this gap lower, and then it breaks out and then retests it back on Wednesday of last week, gaps below it, and it can't hold it. So right now, this blue trend line is really all that we have left. So if it does give us a bounce, though, what am I looking at for potential resistance? I would look at this white line here. This goes back to the July highs. There's not a lot of history with it just yet. It's tested it early on, and then it got close to testing it back in early September of this month, but it hasn't been able to retest it again. But that would be somewhere around this 191 line going forward. If the red lines can't hold, the blue lines can't hold, where do we go? Then you have this little breakout level right here. This would be down in the 155, 156 area. I don't think that's in the here and now, something to be really concerned about. So I'm not watching it. But Apple has definitely changed its tune from this rapid trend line here that saw it go from 122 up to almost $200 a share. Completely different now. You've seen a significant pullback. And one of the bigger concerns here as well is with this blue rising trend line. A lot of people, will be starting to watch this level here because it's held the last 3 times it's tested. But what I don't like is the fact that it has put in a lower high. And a lower high suggests that it didn't have the momentum to take out the previous highs and keep this fantastic trend line in place. You could have made the argument that this wasn't necessarily a trend line break, but more of a flattening of the trend line. But in order for it to be a good trend, it needs higher highs and higher lows, meaning the new highs are higher than the previous highs, and the new lows are higher than the previous lows. So you have higher highs, higher lows. You do have some higher lows, but you don't have a higher high. You have a lower high, and that's a problem for the stock. So keep that in mind. Watch this declining trend line here, this white level for resistance going forward. Watch this purple line, because if it re-challenges it, it could see some pushback from the stock, and then watch tomorrow to see whether or not it can break through this or hold this blue line. If it breaks through it, then you got this red line to contest with here of major multi-year support going back to 2021. Don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel if you'd like more swing trading tips and analysis of your favorite stocks. Thank you guys, and God bless.